let's begin. This one, I think people will be pleased to know. We're gonna chill out a little bit on the science side of things, right? I know over the last few group coaching sessions, we've had sleep quite sort of science or kind of biology, physiology driven. We've had cravings, we've had calorie deficits, we've had all this kind of stuff, which I think we've been sharing quite a bit in terms of the sort of science taking you back to maybe, high school biology. So hopefully it was a bit of a refresher. And today, what we're going to look at is all about winning the weekend. And this is going to be much more sort of practical driven. Also, there's some mindset elements within this. So, everyone really, as we know, has a different structure as to how they go about their week. Are they single? Do they have a family? Are there other obligations? So, this is something that you can take and really, make your own because, we are there to provide the support, the guide rails, the sort of understanding and education, which then you can go and take and implement, trial, and see really what works best for you. So to start with this, we have, as always, asked questions to sort of what you struggle with the topic that we're talking about. So I think there's probably no surprises here. And then just to say, as we go through this presentation, if there's any questions, if there's any comments, if there's anything, like stick it into the chat box. Marvin will be answering, and then when we tag team, I'll be doing the answering, and we'll be keeping things to keep for the questions at the end as well. So please feel free to make the chat box your own. So just to cap off on where people generally struggle, I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate to this, right? The weekend can be a time to socialize with friends, immediate family. There's lots of stuff going on in terms of restaurants, gatherings, offerings, all that kind of stuff. I think as well, people going into the weekend probably feel a bit exhausted, run down from the week. And, there is an element of wanting to relax, but also there's that kind of, torn feeling of needing to do something with the time, right? We don't just sort of live to work, right? We want to do something, we want to enjoy, we want to let loose a little bit. So there's a cycle of intense work, but then also like intense play as well, which makes us just the perfect recipe or the perfect storm for exhaustion. Saying no to a night out, social dinners, friends, family, things are unplanned. There's a full schedule maybe for some, being consistent with meals, especially when the guardrails of the week sort of forced structure is off, right? Everything is open, right? You've got a whole day to deal with. And then maybe people struggle with getting to the gym because it's at work or it's in a different location or whatever it might be. So what I've done is kind of looked at sort of breaking these down into five general big problems, right? So we've got the lack of control. We have the unpredictability of things. Let me say the perceived lack of control, actually. There's the unpredictability, there's chaos, right? Especially if you're managing other people's schedules, if you've got a family. There's obligation. Again, maybe it's your own family, maybe it's your partner's family, maybe friends or whatever's going on there, weddings, this, that, everything else, and the post-week burnout. So just like how when you travel, right, we sort of, because that's a similar thing, right? It's basically just a fun extended weekend. And to be clear on what you need to do when you travel to manage those expectations makes you go into the trip feeling like you have a plan. So I want you to think about the weekend in that kind of way, right? So I want you to manage your expectations of what you want out of the weekend. Is it a case of like chill? Is it a case of, I've got a couple weddings I need to go to, so that is going to, take the lion's share of it. What can I manage around that? Do I need to change expectations? Can I add more? And so you being clear on treating each weekend as its own individual thing, I think will be really beneficial for you then to understand and prioritize the non-negotiables that you can put in play to obviously continue hitting the targets and moving forward with your journey. Equally, this is not going to be something that is perfect, right? There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of finding out what works for you. There's probably a lot of conversations to have with the people around you, which ultimately build with time, right? As they start to understand you, your habits, your choices, your behaviors, all of that kind of stuff. So don't think of this as just, you've had a weekend and it's been a bit of a shitter. That means, you kind of have lost control over all future weekends. It's about seeing what worked well, maybe even talking to myself and Marvin about that, and then looking at what you can do moving forward. Now, I think one of the things we need to sort of preface this with is ultimately, like, let's talk about, fat loss, right? In this instance, we can often see that people absolutely crush the weekdays, right? Sunday to Thursday, they can be nailing it. But when the routine goes out the window, that is when, shit hits the fan. And we see here, so we've got Monday through Thursday, right? For all of us who are on that week. And you may be working hard, training, getting your steps in, eating well, everything going to plan, right? Then when it comes to Friday, things creep in. Maybe you're sleeping in late, maybe you're moving less, maybe you're not getting your steps, maybe you're going for one, two, three free meals in that day. And then the same thing happens again on Saturday, which basically means that like the weekend goes from this calorie surplus, right, where you're overeating in terms of the calories, and it basically undoes the work that you do during the week. So this here is a live example. I've shown this before because it really demonstrates the point well. And this was a client, Abdul Rahman, and he basically would do this exactly to this sort of state, right? And weekend would be crushing it, seeing a nice decline. Sorry, the weekdays. And then the weekend comes and things are out of control. He eats, he doesn't move, he doesn't train. And so we saw this literally pattern for what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, right? And then as soon as we started implementing the managing your expectations, prioritizing your non-negotiables, seeing what works for you and adapting and evolving over time, we saw this nice, very steady decline, right? So we'll get into this, but ultimately, like, this is super important for you to understand is like the weekend is, let's do the maths here, is 2 days, right? 2 days out of the 7 of the week. And so that is basically near on 30% of your week. And so if you are even perfect for the whole of the rest of the week in terms of hitting all of your targets, your protein, your calories, your steps, your training, everything, it is still not going to be enough. So we do still need to retain some level of control over the weekend. So we bump up that 70% to a higher number. And so some of these guiding principles that, I want you to think about when it comes to the weekend is, for fat loss, we'll talk about that as well. It's the calorie deficit. So going back to this, we need to be in a calorie deficit over the course of the week in order to see the change that we want. What's happened here to my screen? There we go. It just froze. Give me 1 second. So calorie deficit is number one importance. To drive success, we need, when you're starting your journey, 70 to 80% consistency in the early stages, right? Month 1, month 2, month 3. As you get deeper into the process, maybe you've lost, a good amount of weight, 5, 10 kilos, whatever it is you are wanting to lose, that needs to then increase the consistency. So you have less room to maneuver, less margin for error over the weekends. So as you get deeper, this is even more important. And then one of the other things I want from like a more sort of framing this point of view is like if you're saying yes to something, that means you're saying no to something else, right? There's always this opportunity cost to everything that we do. So it's important for you to know that if you are making certain decisions over the weekend, it is either going to get us closer to our goal or get us further away. So as we get into this, we're going to be talking about, setting boundaries, implementing structure, planning ahead, and saying no. And ultimately, we are all 100% responsible for what happens within our weekend. So again, I think there's a bit of taking ownership of that. And again, we'll come into that a little bit later. The other side of things is the beliefs, the limiting beliefs we have on the weekends and the weekdays. So weekdays, sorry, can be around structure, restriction, grind, that kind of mentality. So it's no wonder that when we get to the weekend, it can be this sort of chaos or reward or escape from the shit that we've gone through during the week. And so perhaps we go into this fuck it mode, right? I deserve this. I've been working so hard. I can have this, etc., which is a fair thing to think, right? The problem is, this then goes into feelings of guilt. And you may be doing 2 steps forward during the week, only to do 2 to 3 steps backwards at the weekend. And we live in this perpetual diet starts tomorrow again kind of place, right? Where we've potentially gone overboard at the weekend and we think, okay, we need that Sunday reset. We're going to start again. And to be in that cycle basically means that we're not ever seeing any progress. And then it's not a surprise that you may get to the point where you're like, I'm over this. I give up. This is too hard, too restrictive. This isn't for me. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. And so just like Abdul Rahman here, right? He could have reached this point. And I remember he was getting very frustrated. And then to be able to see this pattern shows where the problem lies. So being aware of this being an issue is obviously important. So talking about the cost of the weekend in a way is we get to this point where there's the nutritional cost, so the calorie surplus, extra meals, brunches, desserts, cheat meals, cheat days. You take yourself from being potentially in that calorie deficit to being in calorie maintenance or surplus. So you're potentially even gaining weight at that point. Generally, we like to probably have a little bit more fun. So we go from this poor, or we go to this poor nutritional value. So food moves from the quality, nourishment, fuel that we may have in our eat more list that I'm sure you've seen. And it generally goes to the sort of eat less side of things, right? You've got more processed things, you've got fried stuff, very sort of high fat, high sugar type ingredients, because let's be honest, that's where we find the fun, right? That's where we find the fun. It's not quite as nice going to a cafe and having a salad when you can have French toast or something like that. So again, it's having that understanding of what is really going to drive me forward in this. Do I prioritize it, or do I want that moment of reward, pleasure, relief, or however we look at it at that point? And then also, we skip meals because we don't have that structure. Equally, when it comes to the training and activity cost, we potentially miss workouts. Step count drops. I swear, the amount of people, like, I can spot these a mile off, right? The Fridays in the week always tend to be the no one moves at all kind of way. And when we talk about the calorie deficit, right, where you need to be burning more calories than you're consuming, if then we are consuming more calories during the weekend and moving less, that is where we lose that calorie deficit and go into a calorie surplus or at least calorie maintenance. So the steps drop quite significantly. And then we have this hangover effect, not necessarily in relation to alcohol, but just in relation to being what is like a couch potato all weekend, right? We don't move. We're kind of waking up late. We're going to bed late. And we have this real sluggish body, stiff joints. Workouts are less, our performance quality is less in the workouts, and it has that hangover into the Sunday, right? And maybe even the Monday. And then by Tuesday, you're kind of feeling good again. Wednesday, Thursday, you're feeling good. And then the weekend happens again. So it is that spiral of, a few bad behaviors then have that carryover, that effect. Sleep and recovery cost. Late nights, staying up late, poor quality sleep, shorter duration perhaps. There's this sleep debt as well. And Marvin was going into some really good detail about this in our last group training, where because you are now off your standard body clock you have during the week, your hormones can be disruptive that then can lead to things like increased cravings and, a hunger level that you can't necessarily manage. We have this circadian rhythm shift, which, when we talk about the body clock again, it is self-inflicted jet lag, as Marvin puts it, right? So we have these like this, I don't know, 3-4 hour shift maybe on some nights going to bed at 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m., which then just disrupts the hormonal release in our body. And then the overall cost, obviously, is then starting the new week on the back foot. Lastly, psychological and emotional cost. We have that all or nothing mentality. It's the weekend. I'll restart on Sunday. It's that repeated cycle, that vicious cycle where we start over at square one again. Maybe there's the guilt, maybe there's the stress. And then also this weekend discipline, right? So we do so well to build these habits over the course of the week. Maybe getting up on time, going to gym early in the morning, making sure you're getting your protein. And then these 2 days at the weekend can erode those habits that we've worked so hard to implement. And then you have to start integrating those again the following week. And then ultimately, progress is the ultimate cost in all of this, right? You halt your progress, you experience slower progress. There's that frustration, there's that disappointment, perhaps. And so when you think about what drives progress, as we mentioned many, many times, you behave your way to the result. Progress depends on that consistency. So slip ups, even though it's a day, even though it's 2 days, as we mentioned, it's near on 30% of the week. So, if you're operating perfectly during the rest of the week, that's still only 70% consistent, which, again, unfortunately, in all of this is not enough. So, before I hand over to Marvin, I think we need to do a job of reframing the weekend. And for me, I implore you to think of it as an opportunity that you can seize, right? You're able to experience and explore things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to during the week. That doesn't necessarily mean new restaurants or new desserts or whatever else comes into mind there, but it's an opportunity to do different things, to feel different things, to, try out different things, whatever that might be. For me, that can be things like classes. Maybe it's a boot camp, Pilates, yoga, something like that. It can be, yes, restaurants, but in a slightly different lens in terms of, healthier kind of options, right? It can be also, meeting new people in different communities that are on the same kind of wavelength as you. And that is why, I'm sure you've probably seen on my social media is, on a Saturday morning now, I host a boot camp for people. And that's literally like 25, 30 people coming together on a Saturday morning to share in the experience, right? To do something different, to meet like-minded people. Stop living for the weekend. Life isn't 5 days punishment and 2 reward. It's 7 days of sustainable habits done consistently to achieve results. And then a really good frame actually that Marvin has put in here is around seeing weekends as the launch pad into your week, right? So don't just plan for the work week ahead. A plan for the weekend is very much needed so that then, you can springboard, you can launch into the following week on a high, right? And you can continue that momentum that you've worked so hard to build. I think that's a really big player here is the momentum that you get from doing things consistently. It makes things much, much, much easier once you have these habits and behaviors in play to then continue and sustain them. And then big picture view, 1 or 2 days of chaos every week stalls progress. For sure, it's going to happen. However, if you have one weekend out of 4, one weekend a month where you, for whatever reason, have a few parties to go to, a few gatherings, it's not the end of the world. We always have to take a big picture view in this. We're not robots. We're doing this for, yeah, health, aesthetic reasons, to feel good about ourselves. And so there isn't a sort of a mad rush necessarily for this. The more consistent you are, ultimately, the more you're going to change and see progress. But we're obviously here to live life as well. So now I will pass over to Marvin around getting practical.
Right. So I mean, just in like in light of what Pete said about, that last point about having a big picture view and how having one weekend out of, 4, in a month being less optimal. I think it's also important to recognize that, like, we're social beings, right? And of course, Pete has mentioned, potentially being social in different settings, different, places and environments, of course, where people are training and all those things. But there's also that added element of, just wanting to be social in a restaurant or, going out to try the new place or whatever, So what we're saying here, I mean, Pete has already mentioned it, but just to kind of drum this point home is that we're not seeking this like perfection, like you have to be perfect, right? Like we're about to get practical and like talk about, very, very actionable steps to take to set yourself up for success in on this journey. But we also want to sort of caveat that with the fact that it's so, so, so important to realize that it's really, again, we've said this countless times about progress over perfection, right? We're really just trying to find little bits and pieces of progress that we can make rather than trying to like nail absolutely everything. Because honestly, really, I don't think I've ever met a person that's perfect. And if they are perfect, there's an element of like OCD that probably is like grabbing them by the chains. So we want to be practical. We want to be healthy. We want to have this freedom to be able to do all these things and be healthy, but we also want to be okay with the one weekend a month, right? As opposed to, oh no, I'm on my diet and oh, I'm on this journey and I never go out. No, of course, it's trying to find that balance. So speaking of getting practical, you are the one that is responsible for everything, right? You really need to step up and be the decision maker, setting yourself up for success because ultimately the journey is yours, right? You got to take ownership, be willing to be held accountable for the things that you are doing and not doing. So you make the plans, you control the time. When friends say, oh, let's go out for dinner, you potentially say, oh, let's do an afternoon coffee as an alternative rather than being up much later because we know how that snowballs. You choose the cafe, the restaurant, the takeaway, and you opt for going for a place where there's great steak. So you're getting your protein in, you're getting good quality fats in there as well, rather than, I'll bake, for example. Make your preferences known. So tell people, let them know you'd rather go to something that has options. They still can have whatever they want, but you want to have what you want. You'd rather go somewhere where there's, healthier options. Communicate your needs, set boundaries, let people fit into your plans, schedules. So I'll go to the gym at 1 p.m. and then we can meet later, and let people know. Don't be shy to do that. A lot of people say, I've struggled to talk to my friends or my family or let them know about these things, but don't be shy to let them know. And you're not being pushy. You're not trying to get them on your side. You're just trying to explain what you're doing and get them to understand that you are, on a different path. And base socializing around activity, let's catch up and play paddle. It's the new craze at the moment. Everyone's playing paddle. Let's catch up and go to the boot camp on Saturday. So there's ways around trying to stay active, but still being social, and not just only going to the restaurant. And then nutrition, talking about guilt-free indulgence. We love a bit of ice cream, don't we here, Pete?
Even if it doesn't love us, even if my stomach sort of
Yeah, which is interesting because it's right in there, right? So we're talking about choosing your free meal wisely here, right? I think the first thing you need to remember is that it's a free meal and not a free weekend. You want to have the one meal that you enjoy, that you can indulge in, have with family, friends, whatever the case may be. But it's not about having the entire weekend because, as Pete has mentioned, and as we've seen in previous slides around the calorie deficit, you can easily go way over and eat, one day's worth of food in, well, 3 days worth of food in one day, right? Things like gaming the system and trying to rationalize the fries came with the burger. I've had a tough week, had a big leg session today. It's just one bite. These are essentially just excuses so you can have all the waffles, all the burgers, and everything else that's right in front of you. And this is a really powerful point of you can have anything, just not everything, right? So the balance that I kind of spoke about, we're not saying don't do these things, don't do this, don't do that. However, what we are saying is have boundaries, set boundaries for yourself, acknowledge that you are on a different journey, you're going on a path of least resistance. So there's going to be some challenge, which means saying no to some things, right? Ask yourself, is it worth it? The cold, soggy leftover fries from, the previous night when you could have just not touch them, you know. The bread that comes before the meal, oftentimes it's never really good. You know, it's very rare that this is actually worth it. The stale pastry that someone offers, and then the dreaded ice cream, Pete, the one that messes up your stomach. We all know about this one. I can 100% relate to this one. So what we want to do then is stick to our principles.
Just
We
quickly
want
here. I or like we've worked on this free meal mastery, so your ultimate guide to mastering the free meal. So if you haven't seen this, it is in the resources section within the app, and within here we go through sort of live examples. So I didn't want to spend too much time kind of on the free meal within this because like there's 8 frequently asked questions in there with live working examples so that you can really understand how to make the most out of your free meal and obviously, enjoy, indulge guilt-free without that sort of how would you say the sort of issue that comes with maybe overdoing it with a free day or weekend. So resources section within your app and you can check that out.
And we've got like Pete, you've put in some of the other resources that are really relevant here, similar to this free meal one, right? At the end, so that people can then go and look at in the resources tab of the app. So speaking of principles, right, we want to stick to these as best as we can. So this is a great example of how you would approach 2 different days, for example, right? You still want to go protein first, which is the principle that we go by. Completely and haven't stopped going at ad nauseum. Fruit and veg second, and then your starchy carbs last. And you don't want to skip meals because this leads to binging when you do eventually eat. Imagine the person that wakes up on a Friday morning and says, "Oh, I'm only going to eat later. I'm going to, fast, or I'm going to starve myself and then going to go for a big one later in the day." What do you think is going to happen? You're going to inhale everything. You're not even going to eat it. 4,000, 5,000 calories will go down like they're absolutely nothing. So a nice little example of how you'd probably approach this. You still have your nice breakfast with your eggs, your fruits, your veg, a decent quality lunch, protein, fruits, veg. And then you have your free meal, right? Your burger, your fries. And then afterwards, your dinner, or I guess that would be your dinner. But then if you're going to have your Greek yogurt, your, berries, and then another example here at the bottom as well, where maybe you're starting the day with a family breakfast. So you go for the French toast, right? But then afterwards, that doesn't mean the day is now, you just keep going and keep going and keep going. You actually then go back to your principles, go back to the lunch you would have, typically had any other day. You're sticking to the principles of the protein first, fruit and veg second, and then the starchy carbs, as you can see over here.
And I think just on one of the sort of comments from Mai in the chat is, if there is a bad weekend or travel and, despite all of your best intentions and forward planning, like what do you do if then, like what do you do for the follow-up, right? So you've had maybe an absolute shitter of a weekend where you, I don't know, ate Five Guys every single meal of every single day. What would you do at that point? Marvin, let's see if your answer matches my answer.
Are we going to test right now?
Yes, we got a live test.
Well, I'm of the opinion or actual, yeah, opinion that the what's the cliche phrase of you fall down 7 times, pick yourself up eight, right? So don't let things snowball, right? You ideally want to just go back to how you would normally eat. You've had the Five Guys, you've had the fries, like forget about what's happened in the past and let's go back to, your original plan that you would have typically gone for. What would you do, Pete? Would you not just dust yourself off and pick
Yeah, pick
yourself up?
yourself up and dust yourself off, right? I think it is a case of just like get back and hit your targets. I think if
Yeah.
you do it the other way, where you're then overly restrictive or overly excessive in, forcing yourself to, double your steps and maybe cut back on so much food that then it leads to cravings and all that kind of stuff, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot as well. So think of it again more as long term. Just pick yourself up and go again, basically. And if you did want to, you could start looking at potentially, making sure you nail your steps, increase the steps a little bit more. Maybe you train harder within your session because now you've got all this fuel in you. Your glycogen stores are full from the weekend sort of overindulgence. So you can probably push harder in your training. Equally, if you did want to, you could reduce the carbohydrate a little bit from the first couple days just to balance it out. But again, like nothing in extremes because, give it a couple days and things will balance themselves out anyway. And then at least you're on a good run where you're in your flow again. You've started with the habits and so on. So that was a live test. Thank God we said the same thing, Marvin.
And that's like there's the cliche that we people used to say often, well, back in the day, right? Of like you can't outtrain a bad diet. And that's pretty it's true, right? You can't do that. So just because you've had the Five Guys and whatever doesn't mean you now need to go and undo all the damage or by trying to work yourself out and burn all those extra calories, right? They're going to get burnt anyway. They're going to get used, like Pete said, in your session when you do the few extra steps here and there. So
And just to probably preempt this as well, there is no like detox. Maybe
yeah.
you've had a week of maybe drinking, maybe whatever, doing things you shouldn't be doing. You're not coming back to detox. The body is
Yeah.
perfectly capable of detoxing itself, so you don't
Yeah.
need to go to, I don't know, like juice cleansers and all this kind of bullshit. Just get back to solid, nutritious, healthy food. Prioritize movement, prioritize sleep, and your body will look after the rest.
Yeah, if your body didn't detox well, you probably wouldn't be alive, right? So, getting back into, the practical steps that we were talking about earlier, it's really important to have the impactful behavior change, right? You're on this journey, and it's a journey for a reason. You are continually moving forward. It's not, I'm doing this for 30 days, I'm doing this for 90 days. It's a journey. So it's about impactful behavior change and subtle, right? Because you want it to be gradual, you want it to be, moving along as you continue to progress on the journey. Um, so you want to be aware of the mindset, right, that you're in on when it comes to the weekend, especially when it comes to like ordering food. Be conscious of, are you impulsive? Are you hungry? Are you emotional? I think we spoke about this with the cravings, right? So this would be another one of those good resources to go back to. Some things like not going to the grocery store when hungry. This has been a big one for me. I'll be very honest. I think this has happened to me like 3 or 4 times in the last in the last few weeks where I have made this mistake and anything goes. Trust me. It's just like you honestly feel like you can have the entire grocery store and you end up making decisions that honestly don't feel so good afterwards. So definitely don't suggest that you go to the grocery store hungry. One thing that I've also then tried to implement is starting to eat slowly, right? Chew your food, pause, putting down your utensils between bites. And especially if you're at a big gathering or if you're around a lot of people, you're sat at the table with family and friends, it's actually, use that time to socialize with people, be able to put things down, chat, ask a question, catch up, that sort of stuff.
And also, no one can put stuff on your plate when you're walking around.
Exactly,
Secret,
exactly.
secret hack.
Yeah, yeah. And then avoid mindless eating, right? Like when you sat at, on your couch, or rather lounging on your couch, right? You've got the Netflix and that type of stuff. So you want to be cautious of not having, all these snacks or, perhaps even swapping out the Netflix for conversation, card games, that type of stuff where it's engaging, it's interactive. You're not just vegging out and then easily picking up your phone and getting on Lugmity or Hunger Station to get your fix of, whatever you enjoy with your Netflix.
Going back to the grocery store, I went shopping early this morning, and this afternoon I was really kind of craving something at home, and I'm like, "Damn you, Pete! I have Greek yogurt, I have oats, and like veg that I bought and I topped up on. So I've got nothing exciting at home. So then it's like, okay, fine, I just eat
Yep.
normal."
Exactly. Remove access, right? We spoke about that a couple weeks ago. And then into movement, being intentional and having enriching activity during the weekends. Pete, you've been doing this quite a bit, right? In the mornings,
I
Friday morning. What are
know,
you
I
doing?
have indeed. Sort of, what is it? 6 a.m. Corniche sort of walk. I've seen Arwa there with her dragging along her kids
The two boys.
to kind of bike and cycle on the Corniche early morning. I
Yeah.
saw Abdullah Karim at the what was it, the Ballad 5K, who also dragged out his family. But that was amazing to see everyone there and obviously doing something as we kind of spoke about before, right? Having a new experience. And yes, it's obviously horrible getting up in the morning at that time, but if you go to bed early, it's not that bad. But also, it just adds this enriching element to your life. Because for me, kind of as you say, like I've been doing this all through summer. Yes, it's absolutely horrible in terms of the humidity, the heat, and all that kind of stuff. But like the feeling you get from, being there, sunrise, seeing other people, is awesome. And this isn't just something that is unique to Jeddah, even though yes, we do have the sea here. But Riyadh, you've got places like the Sports Boulevard. There's bikes. There's sort of things that you can do. Obviously, in other parts of the world as well. There's places to go, places to walk. Yes, it may mean you have to do that early in the morning or later in the afternoon or evening, but it is possible to implement, and it does enrich you rather than just keep you penned into your Groundhog Day, same place, same cafe, staying at home, curtains drawn. It adds to your life, and so that's why I really like it because I absolutely fucking hate running. But
Yeah, I remember when I was on a bit of a running kick as well, getting up Friday, 5 a.m., going on the Corniche. And it's funny because you can definitely see there's a big difference between the people that have woken up early, going on their walks, running with the kids, with the family, and those that have pretty much stayed up all night. So please be the former, don't be the latter. Now, making movement a ritual. So make movement a weekend ritual rather. Planning your day, seizing slots for yourself, or building it into a habit, for family or friends. Get people going with you, get people going to the Corniche with you in the morning, or to, Riyadh Boulevard with you in the morning, to be able to actually start that day with intention, right? When you do your walks, going for cycles, um, and if weather's a limiter, think about how you can combat this. You can do this indoors, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be going for a walk or going outdoors or doing stuff like that. It can always be, doing a workout at home, just getting up early, getting people, used to and adjusted to that routine of not always just lying in on a Friday morning, right? And this is quite a nice framework here, Pete, of like ritualizing it. So we already know, I think we've spoken again about, stacking your habits as from the book Atomic Habits, James Clear, where if there's certain habits that you do anyway, right? You do them in a involuntarily, right? And so if you're going to do those, you might as well find other good habits that you want to stack on top of that. So on a Friday morning, right, people probably do their Friday prayer, they go for coffee with friends. Why not add and stack a habit and go for a workout, right? If you've missed a workout from the week, add a Friday workout, you do a 6 or 7 a.m. walk, favorite coffee spot, read a book, and then you return to your family because you're going to see your family anyway. Might as well stack a couple habits before that will really be enriching this weekend. Father son early morning walk for all you dads in here. I will soon be doing this with my little guy and getting out on Friday mornings and then back home to family time. Leave his mom alone, let her have some alone mommy time as well. Try something new. There's obviously lots happening around town. We've got the boot camps that Pete is doing on Saturdays, loads of Pilates studios popping up all over Jeddah at least, and I'm sure rest of Saudi and Dubai, as well. Rock climbing. I was a big fan of rock climbing. Actually bit the bug at some point. And this was really fun for a weekend. We would actually go out to Taif every weekend. So you wake up really early, which means you sleep early on Thursday night. You're out all day, you take good food with you, you're climbing, you're active, you're socializing with a whole bunch of people. So you see how, again, it's the one thing ends up snowballing to another thing, and then it just keeps going, right? It just keeps rolling. And you find your people, you find some tribes in here that you can really enjoy spending time with. You make friends in there, and you guys end up doing a lot more stuff together than just the one thing you probably connected on. And then embracing your gym time, right? The weekends was it Mia who said the best time to wake up on a Friday morning is or the best time to train is a Friday morning when the gym's empty. So less busy, there's no rush, there's no sharing machines, there's no waiting for this person that's hogging, the squat rack. And you just be able to also then get time on the treadmill, get some post session steps in. You can use the spa, if your gym has a cold plunge, sauna, that type of stuff. It's like, the gym is yours. I think it was a SEAL the other day who was saying, the gym is mine. I own this place. It really will feel like that for you. And then if you struggled for time during the week, whether it was a really busy week from work, you traveled, all that sort of stuff, you can also then use the weekend to catch up on your workouts. And then getting into sleep, which we touched on a couple weeks ago, this is the one where people tend to deprioritize completely. It all goes out the window, right? It's the weekend, you want to lie in, you're exhausted, you're tired, you're running on fumes, and you just feel like, I just need to have a long lie in, right? So we want to avoid that self-inflicted jet lag. If you sleep late 2 days in a row, you've essentially put yourself, in jet lag. You're no different from someone that's flying all the way from the States and they've had to deal with time zone differences. So you really want to avoid this self-inflicted jet lag. You want to keep your anchor habits, right? The ones we spoke of, that pre-bedtime alarm, wake up time as being the same, minimizing screens before bed, eating before bed, making sure that that's at least 2 to 3 hours before so it doesn't disrupt digestion. You're then able to get into good quality sleep, deep sleep, the restorative one. And so one tip to do for this one is to actually just pick one day that you're going to sleep late because we know that, there's gatherings, there's all sorts of things happening. So if you know that there's something happening that weekend, then pick one day to sleep late or wake up late and as opposed to the whole weekend, right? Otherwise, you wake up on Sunday morning feeling like, oh my goodness, I've been hit by a truck. That's why there's people talk about the Monday blues. Well, I guess everywhere else but Saudi, it's Monday. For us here, it's Sunday. So Sunday blues for us. It's not because, they were, doing whatever crazy things during the weekend. It's because you've essentially given yourself that jet lag, right? You've been lounging around, you're doing nothing, and you've been eating, pretty much everything. So we want to avoid that. Optimizing your self-care is, another one that we could do, focusing on recovery of your mind, body, just to, deal with the intensity of the week. Because obviously when you're at work, there's a lot happening, there's deadlines you're trying to meet. So it's a really good time to just de-stress, ease the load, whether it's a spa visit, a home massage, physio checkup, sauna, steam, cold, obviously the gym's empty, you can, make use of that. Journaling is a really good one as well. I think that the iPhone now has like a journal section on the phone that you can actually do. And that's quite a nice touch. So you can be journaling, having weekly reflections, digital detox, that's also just nice to do. Just get away from, the social media and all the craze of, what's happening and just be able to quieten your mind, spending more time in nature. And if you can, switch off from all work-related matters, completely switch off, turn that off. So you're focusing on, what's within your surroundings, your family, your friends, recharging as well and spending time with the right people. What's your self-care routine like, Pete, during the weekend?
You
Can
put
you
me on the
share?
spot here, Marvin. My self-care routine. To be honest, as people will know now, probably more of, I have tried to set boundaries with actually client-related stuff, if I'm honest. I've tried to sort of give myself Fridays off entirely, Saturdays off as well, because I would always be present non-stop. And so we do need to practice what we preach, right? We need to kind of give ourselves those boundaries, put them into place so that then you can come back on the Sunday feeling refreshed, recharged, etc. So apologies if I ignore you, but it is for my own good. Marvin ignores me as well at the weekend, so I know how it feels.
Yep.
But other than self-care, to be honest, I do enjoy like a longer gym session. It's a shame that the gym opens up on a 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. On Friday for me. But what I do then to combat that is I make sure the Friday morning is like, run time territory. Then I go somewhere for a nice breakfast. And then, it doesn't matter if I have a nap during the day or sit in front of the TV all day because I have kind of done something that ticks that box for myself. What actually helps me get up in the morning at like 5:30 on a Friday is knowing that it's okay, Pete. In a couple hours' time, you'll be back and you'll be asleep. You can have a nap. So that fuels me as well. How about you? What's your self-care?
Nice. Well, mine is typically a 5:30 wake up. We've got an alarm in our house. We don't need, watches and that type of stuff. We have a 1-year-old screaming in our ears to wake us up at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, but when before the summer, we would get up, go for a walk, him and myself, and just walk around. There's like is it called the Memsha in Rauda? Just a little strip of walking. Get back home, have some breakfast, make breakfast for everyone, and then get together with some friends. Have a nice tradition of getting together with some friends um, over coffee, over conversation, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So up early and moving, which is a nice way to kick off the weekend.
For sure, rather than sort of being on that back foot and sort of everything being delayed and playing catch up.
Yes.
But into
Yes.
final thoughts then. Over to you.
Yes. So weekends are not the problem, as you would have seen, right? How you choose to spend them it's a matter of being able to spot your triggers, right? We spoke about the trigger and the habit loop in the cravings. Know your weaknesses, and then set limits, boundaries, staying active. Use the weekends as a springboard for the coming week or as a launch pad, as one of the previous slides had said. Flip your thinking and think to yourself, if I can win my weekend, then I can win my week, right? The same way we typically like to plan for the week ahead, the work week ahead. But if you can incorporate that the weekend is also, taken into consideration and you're also planning for that, maybe a little bit more loosely, right? Not every single hour done to a T, but a little bit more loosely understanding that, oh, I'm going to try and do this, I'm going to do that. Then it sets you up for a successful week. And then we have a challenge for you for this weekend. And we're going to ask what is one thing that you can implement from this list or something that you can decide on that you don't already do to break the weekend cycle. Because at the moment, I'm sure everyone has, you typically have your weekend cycle, and we've spoken about how you probably have all these things that you're doing. There's a lot happening, or you're lounging around doing absolutely nothing. And so to be able to start changing the mindset and as your habits as well, what's one thing that you're going to implement from this list? So are you going to take your family or friends out for an outdoor activity, whether that's a long walk, a hike, a bike ride like Arwa with her kids? Are you going to order in or eat out, but just once as opposed to two, three, maybe even four times, right? Choosing one meal that's not on your regular plan rather than multiple. Are you going to sleep at the same time and wake up at the same time all weekend? Pick your poison. Which one is it going to be? It'd be lovely to hear what everyone's thinking in the chat.
What's
And
yours,
then,
Marvin? What's yours?
well, I've already broken the cycle, mate. So now I'm joking. I'm not perfect. I think for us, it's well, for myself, it's definitely sleeping and waking up at the same time. I tend to sleep a little bit later on a Thursday night for no reason whatsoever. So definitely the sleeping and waking up at the same time. And yourself, Pete?
Well, I think there's that like rebellious teenager in all of us, right? Or like kid who wants to stay up late and it's the weekend and you sort of you do rebel even though you know it's going to cost you in the morning.
Yeah.
Every night that happens. But anyway, Mia, is there a prize? The prize is what's the prize, Marvin?
Hmm. I don't
You can
know.
hope the prize is you get to host the next group coaching session with the topic of your choice.
Yes, yes.
Nice. But yeah, I think like a lot of the time it's, you start early with this is going to be 9 months of solid progress from Mia, now down the drain. Uh, so yeah, again, like if you start early, right, you can like seize the day that way, and then you
Yeah,
feel like you're in a good place, you've moved, you've done something. Maybe it's an at-home workout, maybe it's a walk, maybe it is, joining a class in the morning, whatever it is. Like if you start early in the day, that then transforms what happens to the rest of your day. Like I promise you that. It really does transform that. And I think sort of, just to kind of round this off, there are some useful resources that if you haven't seen already, they're definitely worth taking a look at. the free meal mastery, fat loss made simple, going through the calorie deficit again, breaking through fat loss plateaus, and then, the importance of sleep. Not quite the sexiest thing, but an incredibly impactful thing. And let's open up now to questions.